The kitchen faucet had been dripping all night. I counted 143 drops before I gave up. At 2:46 a.m., the digital clock on the microwave blinked and froze, just went static like time itself had shrugged and said, "I'm done." And still, no sign of her. I had already checked the street twice, once barefoot, once with my hoodie on. Her car wasn't there. The engine didn't hum from the driveway. No headlights in the distance. Just the soft flicker of the neighbor's broken porch light, blinking like it was mocking me. I didn't panic. Not the first hour. I paced. Checked her last location. Unavailable. Checked again. Unavailable. By 3:17 a.m., I opened the hall closet and started folding towels. Not because they needed folding, but because I needed something to control. I lined them up by size, then by color, then by thread count. It's a strange thing, how your brain finds rituals when it doesn't know what else to do. At 4:12 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table and stared at her cereal bowl, still full from yesterday morning. She'd left in a rush. No spoon, no milk, just dry flakes, stale now, with a single long hair resting in the middle. At 5:03 a.m., I opened the joint account spreadsheet on my laptop and scrolled. There it was. $793. 14 Lyft. $1,220. Hotel Del Monte. $29. 99 Spotify, new account. $84. Flower delivery, not to me. No explanation. No receipts. No anniversary. No apology waiting in my inbox. When the sun finally dragged itself up around 6:30, I walked over to the counter, grabbed the only pen that still worked, and wrote, "Hope the breakfast buffet was worth it. I'm out. And the debt? That's all yours now." No yelling. No theatrics. Just ink. I placed the note on the edge of the sink, right next to her favorite mug, the one that says "Do no harm, but take no crap." Ironic, really, but I didn't leave right away, because before I walked out that door, I opened the junk drawer and found something that changed everything I thought I knew about my own marriage. It was under the batteries, folded twice, labeled in handwriting I didn't recognize, and it had yesterday's date on it. The paper was creased twice, once horizontally, once vertically, neat, intentional, like someone took care folding it, not like the receipts and junk we usually toss into that drawer. And the handwriting, it wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. And yet, it was sitting beneath our half-dead batteries and expired coupons like it had been waiting. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. My fingers were cold, but my spine was colder. The envelope didn't have a name, just the date. Yesterday. Written in blue ink, with an almost childlike loop on the number 5. I unfolded it slowly, expecting nonsense. Maybe a scribbled note she wrote to herself and forgot. But it wasn't a grocery list. It was a letter. A real one. And it started with, "I know what I'm doing is wrong." That single sentence punched the air out of my lungs. I read it again. My vision blurred for a second, and I thought it might be lack of sleep. But no, it was something deeper than that. I blinked hard and kept going. The letter wasn't addressed to me. It was written to someone named Nate. Not Nathan. Not a coworker I'd met. Just Nate. She went on about how complicated things had become, how she didn't expect feelings to grow this fast, and how she couldn't keep lying much longer. She mentioned last Sunday, the hotel, and, my favorite line, how easy it is to fall asleep next to you compared to at home. I stopped there. I didn't need the rest. I should have screamed, or broken something, or stormed out like in the movies. But instead, I just sat down in the middle of the kitchen floor, legs crossed, letter still in my hand. I thought about the time she faked a fever to avoid going to my sister's wedding. I thought about the night I got food poisoning and she texted her boss from the bathroom. I thought about her strange anxiety walks that conveniently started right after dinner and lasted until nearly midnight. And the thing that made me sickest? I had defended her every time. Every single time. I was her alibi. I was the idiot covering for her while she was out buying hotel room mints and second Spotify accounts. And now there was Nate. The letter was dated yesterday, but it mentioned meeting again tonight, which meant she planned to come home, sleep in our bed, lie to my face, again, like nothing happened. So I made a decision. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab clothes. I took my car keys, my wallet, and that letter. But before I left, I grabbed that same pen from earlier, the one I used to write the note about the debts, and I crossed out the word "good luck." I replaced it with, "He can help you now. See." Then I took a photo of the letter, printed it on our home printer, left a copy next to her cereal bowl. She can deny things when they're in her head. She can't when they're in black and white. But just when I thought the worst of it was behind me, my phone buzzed. It was a bank alert. A new charge, today, for a key-cutting service across town. 2 new keys. One for her. One for Nate. There's something so eerie about seeing your own life move without you. I watched the bank alert 3 times, thinking maybe I misread it. Maybe it was an old charge or some glitch. But no, it was real. Timestamped at 11:28 a.m. this morning. She was at work then. Supposedly. The location? A hardware shop 20 minutes from our house. Not one she'd ever mentioned. Not one we'd ever been to together. But what caught me wasn't the store. It was the item. $12.50. Key duplication. 2 copies. 2 keys. Not one. Not a replacement. 2 freshly cut keys. And not for me. I opened our kitchen drawer, the second one from the left, the one with the old birthday candles, pins that don't work, and her labeled envelopes. I pulled out our house copy envelope. Empty. Of course it was. I paced the living room like a caged animal, but quietly, almost politely, as if not to wake the ghosts of my own denial. My heart wasn't racing. It had gone the other way, slow, mechanical, ticking in rhythm with the betrayal I was starting to see in high definition. So what now? I could confront her, wait for her to come home, and stage some dramatic scene. Ask her if Nate likes oat milk too. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt wrong. Not ineffective, just insufficient. Because this wasn't just infidelity. This was preparation. You don't cut new keys unless you're changing locks or giving someone access. You don't create a second Spotify account unless you're hiding shared songs. You don't lie about hotel receipts unless you've stopped seeing your spouse as someone who matters. I wasn't going to give her the luxury of seeing me broken. Instead, I decided to leave a message she couldn't delete. Not one typed on a phone or spoken in a trembling voice. No, I needed something visual, unignorable, something that would burn itself into her memory the moment she opened the front door. I went upstairs to our guest bedroom, the one we barely used, where her old camera gear was still packed in boxes. I opened the closet and dug out the whiteboard she used back when she did lifestyle vlogging during the pandemic. It was dusty but intact. I carried it down to the living room and wrote in black permanent marker. This house has 3 keys now. Use 1. Bring him 2, if he's brave enough. Then below that, I taped the printed letter, the one she wrote to Nate, right under the sentence about falling asleep next to him. But I wasn't done. I placed the note I'd written earlier, the one about the debts, neatly on the couch cushion. Then I gathered every framed photo of us from the house. Every trip, every fake laugh, every posed smile in front of Christmas trees and bridges and dinners we couldn't afford. I laid them all out on the dining table, face down. Every single one. When I finally stepped outside, the morning air hit like ice water. Not because of the temperature, but because I had no plan beyond that moment. I sat in the car, gripped the steering wheel, and stared at the front of my own house like it didn't belong to me anymore. And then something happened. A silver Toyota, not hers, pulled into the driveway. He got out. Tall, clean cut, wearing a company ID badge. Nate. He had a key. I didn't even turn the ignition. I just sat there and watched him. He stepped out like this was routine, like he'd been there before, which, let's be honest, he probably had. I couldn't hear the click from the car, but I saw it in his hand. A small glint of metal, a duplicate key. My key, or what used to be mine. He looked over his shoulder once. Not nervous, just careful, then walked right up the steps, inserted the key, and disappeared inside like he belonged there. It wasn't even noon yet. She wasn't home. I knew that. Her office calendar was still synced to our shared tablet. She had a staff meeting scheduled until 1 p.m., back-to-back with a video call, which meant he had the house to himself for at least an hour. Maybe that was the plan. Maybe they'd been planning this for weeks. I had 2 choices. Drive away, never look back, or stay. Watch what he did. Watch how far this went. Guess which I picked? I locked the doors, slid down in my seat just enough to stay hidden behind the dashboard, and kept my eyes glued to the windows. The blinds in the living room were half closed, so I couldn't see much at first, just the occasional shadow crossing the hall. Then, about 10 minutes later, the front door opened again. He stepped out, now holding something that didn't belong to him, my framed wedding photo. The one from the beach ceremony. The one we kept by the fireplace. I watched him walk over to the garbage bins, open the lid, and just drop it in. No hesitation. No second glance. That photo was behind glass. It shattered when it hit the bottom of the bin. And that's when I realized he wasn't just visiting. He was replacing me. He hadn't come to sneak around. He'd come to clean house. To remove what was left of me before she returned, like I was a stain that needed scrubbing. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles cracked. I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I was insulted. Violated. Because this wasn't rage-fueled passion or a secret tryst. This was systematic. Like I was being edited out of my own life, one object at a time. I waited until he went back inside before I got out of the car. I didn't rush. I didn't stomp. I walked calmly, casually, like a neighbor coming over to borrow a drill. I knocked once, then opened the door, with my key still on my ring. He was in the living room when he heard it. Turned around slowly, like he couldn't quite believe it. I watched the color drain from his face as I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. He froze. Didn't speak. Neither did I, not at first. I walked over to the whiteboard I left propped against the couch and pointed to the line that said, "Bring him too, if he's brave enough." "Guess you didn't read the whole thing," I said. He blinked. She said. I don't care what she said. I cut him off. Silence. Then I smiled. Not because I found anything funny, but because I knew something he didn't. She didn't know I was still there. She had no idea I saw the charge for the keys. No clue I read the letter. And she definitely didn't know I was about to forward a copy of that letter, along with screenshots of their messages, hotel receipts, and security footage from our doorbell cam, straight to her company's HR department. Because guess who still had access to her work laptop? I left Nate standing there. Didn't touch him. Didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Take your copy of the key and go. I'll mail her the rest." But he didn't move. That's when I noticed something in his hand. It wasn't just the key. It was a ring. I stared at the ring in his hand for what felt like a full minute, but it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. Time had been playing tricks on me all morning, stretching and snapping like a rubber band around my sanity. I didn't say anything right away. Neither did he. He just stood there holding it. Not like he was planning to propose. Not like he was surprised I'd caught him, but like he didn't know where to put it now that I was in the room. And I'll be honest, the way he looked at me wasn't apologetic. It was confused. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," he finally said. I blinked. "See what?" "The ring." "She wasn't supposed to." He stopped, closed his fist around it. His lips twitched like he was calculating something behind his eyes. "Forget it." Now, I'm not a violent guy. I'm not the type who throws punches or breaks plates. I fold towels to calm down, remember? But in that moment, I took a slow step toward him. Not threatening, just enough to let him know I was still in control of my house. He backed up, just slightly, toward the window. "Was that hers?" I asked, nodding at his closed fist. "No." The answer came out flat. Simple. "Not hers. Not hers." "So then whose was it?" He hesitated. Then, like he'd made a decision, slipped the ring back into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone instead. "Look, man," he said, tapping a few times. "I didn't come here to make this worse. I didn't even know about you until 2 weeks ago." That line hit like a sledgehammer made of ice. 2 weeks ago. They'd been seeing each other for months. The receipts went back to July. The hotel reservations, the dinner dates, the second Spotify account, all of it. And he only just found out she had a husband? "So what?" I said, quieter than before. "You thought you were the boyfriend?" He didn't answer. Just turned the phone toward me. I expected photos, maybe messages. What I saw was worse. It was a calendar, shared between them, labeled Life Plan. It had future dates blocked off, condo tours, financing appointments, a housewarming dinner scheduled for November 19th with his parents, a contact labeled Mover confirmed with a checkmark next to it. They'd been building a life together, without telling me, or apparently, without telling him the full truth either. "She told me you were her ex, that you'd moved out 3 months ago, but were dragging your feet on signing the papers." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it all suddenly seemed. While I'd been losing sleep over missing towels and key charges, she'd been crafting an entirely new timeline where I didn't even exist. "She lied to both of us," I muttered. Nate nodded once, looking exhausted now. "Yeah." I grabbed the calendar from his hand, scrolled through the upcoming months. It went as far as April. Flights. Concerts. A spa weekend in Asheville. Things we used to dream about doing. Things I thought she gave up on. Turns out, she didn't. She just gave up on me. You should go, I said quietly, still holding his phone. You going to call her? No. She'll figure it out when she gets here. But you need to leave before I stop being polite. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. He turned and left without another word. This time, he didn't lock the door behind him. Good. It wasn't his to lock. I stood alone in the living room for what felt like an hour. Then, I opened the laptop. I wasn't going to send the letter to her company's HR anymore. No. Now I had something better. Something she wouldn't be able to explain. The shared calendar had a hidden comment thread, and in it, a photo of a document with my forged signature. I'd seen my own signature enough times to know what it should look like. This wasn't it. The strokes were too clean, too deliberate. The kind of signature someone writes when they're trying to copy yours, not when they own it. There was a photo embedded in the shared calendar comment thread. Just one image. A cropped, slightly angled shot of a lease agreement. New property. An apartment unit across town. And at the bottom, my name. Or at least, something pretending to be. I leaned in closer, staring at the JPEG like it might blink if I looked hard enough. But there it was, my full name, signed on the dotted line, next to hers. The date was 3 weeks ago, while I was still sleeping in the same bed as her. While I was still buying groceries and fixing the broken towel rack in our bathroom. And then I noticed the name of the leasing agent. I knew her. Not personally, but we'd emailed once, months ago, when Darla and I were casually browsing new places. I remembered the signature at the bottom of her email. Tamara C., Leasing Coordinator, Pelham Pines. Same company. Same agent. I checked the time. 12:41 p.m. Darla would be home within the hour. I had two choices. Let her walk in, lie, deflect, and cry her way through this. Or get proof so concrete she wouldn't even try. I picked up the phone and called Tamara. She answered on the third ring, chipper and professional. I gave her a fake name at first. Said I was calling on behalf of a client who needed to verify a lease signed under urgent circumstances. I read the address from the calendar image. Her tone shifted, polite, but hesitant. I'm sorry, I need permission from the tenants to disclose that kind of. I'm one of the tenants, I interrupted. Silence. Then I gave her my real name. And the line went completely quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. Measured. Mr. Kessler, we received the signed paperwork weeks ago. Both signatures were on file. The account's active. Payments have already been processed. Processed by who? Ms. Avery. Darla. Using what card? She paid the first month and deposit using a joint account listed under both your names. I nearly dropped the phone. She'd used our joint account. The one I'd kept funding while she took time off to figure things out. She hadn't figured anything out. She'd just figured out how to move me out without asking me to leave. There was no hesitation in her plan. No mess. No drama. She was orchestrating the cleanest exit a cheater could engineer, with forged signatures, shared finances, and a perfectly timed replacement. And yet, she was still coming home. That's what twisted the knife. Because if she was this close to leaving me, legally, physically, emotionally, why hadn't she just gone? Why was she still sleeping under the same roof? Pretending to laugh at reruns with me? Letting me make coffee every morning like we were still normal? I ended the call with Tamara politely. I didn't let my voice shake. I took screenshots of everything. The signature, the bank charge, the property listing, and backed it all up to a private folder I named Reality. Then I turned off the lights. I wanted her to walk into silence. No music, no lights, no greeting. Just silence and truth. I sat in the far corner of the dining room, where she wouldn't see me right away. I left the whiteboard exactly where it was. I repositioned the letter she wrote to Nate. Then I placed one more note on the table. A final one. The last she'd ever find from me. It said, I saw everything. The key. The calendar. The lease. You lied with precision. I left with clarity. See, at 1:12 p.m. I heard the garage door open. She was home. But it wasn't her footsteps I heard first. It was a second set. Lighter. Faster. She brought him back. The door didn't creak. It opened smooth and silent, like everything else she'd planned. I stayed perfectly still behind the hallway archway. No breathing, no movement, just eyes fixed on the front entrance. She stepped in first, keys jangling softly in her hand, laughing, actually laughing at something he said just behind her. The kind of laugh you only give someone when you feel weightless. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in months. Not with me. She dropped her purse on the entry table without looking up. He followed behind her, just a few steps, holding a small paper bag. I could smell it even from the hall. Thai takeout. Our favorite. Or maybe it used to be. Just drop it in the kitchen, she said casually, kicking off her shoes. He stepped ahead of her and saw the whiteboard. He froze mid-step. His face shifted from calm to confused to very, very aware. He glanced over his shoulder at her, but she was still checking her phone, oblivious. Then she looked up. I don't know what I expected her reaction to be. Shock, guilt, panic, but what I saw was calculation. She didn't gasp, didn't scream. She just tilted her head, reading the note like it was a memo on her desk. Then her eyes scanned the printed copy of the lease, the forged signature, the shared calendar still open on the tablet. Her body stiffened slightly. Not fear, more like irritation. Then she whispered something to him. I couldn't hear it clearly, but it sounded like, don't touch anything. Too late for that. Because while she processed her unraveling plan, Nate was already cracking under the pressure. His eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the partially open guest room door, then toward the dining table. His hands were shaking. He hadn't signed up for this version of the script. She turned toward the dining room slowly, and that's when she saw me. I was sitting calmly in the chair, one leg crossed over the other, arms folded, and in front of me on the table was a single USB drive. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it press on her throat. Then I said, you were supposed to be gone already. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. For once, Darla didn't have a spin. No excuse. No lie she could string together fast enough. She was caught in the act, but more importantly, caught in the middle, halfway between two lives, and suddenly locked out of both. I didn't know you were here, she said finally, her voice low and tight. I know, I replied. That was the point. She glanced at the USB. What is that? Everything, I said. Calendar exports. Photos. Bank statements. Screenshots of your emails to the leasing office. Even your little text thread with Tamara about making sure I didn't stall the paperwork. Her eyes narrowed. You went through my stuff? You built your exit plan in front of my face and used our money to fund it. I figured we were past the point of boundaries. She looked toward Nate, but he wasn't backing her. He looked as cornered as I wanted him to. And then, just to twist the knife a little further, I leaned in and added, you want to tell him about the offshore account? Her head snapped toward me. Got her. There was no offshore account. I made it up. But the fact that she hesitated, the fact that her mouth twitched just enough before she forced out a denial, told me everything. Nate backed up toward the door. You never said he lived here, he said, his voice dry. She said a lot of things, I muttered. He looked at her again. You told me he'd already left. That he was in North Carolina. I didn't know he was still coming back. You mean living in the house? I said. The one she used my name to lease out while she was still eating dinner across from me every night? He stared at her for a long moment. Then he opened the front door and left without another word. She didn't chase him. She didn't cry. She just stood there, the door slowly closing behind him, staring at the life she thought she could rewrite without consequences. You think I ruined this? She finally whispered. I laughed. No, I said, standing slowly. You didn't ruin it. You erased it. And then I walked past her, out the door, into a life that no longer had to carry her lies. But this story doesn't end there. Because the moment I left the house, the moment the lock clicked behind me, my phone buzzed with an email I wasn't supposed to receive. An automated alert from my own lawyer. The divorce papers had already been filed. By her. 5 days ago. I didn't even feel the cold until I reached the car. I was gripping the steering wheel again. Only this time, not from anger. Just to hold something solid. Something real. The house behind me was silent. No shouting. No crashing. No apologies. Just stillness. A silence I had waited months to finally experience. The notification from my lawyer had landed in my inbox just minutes after I stepped outside. Automatic. Sterile. No warm signature at the bottom. No reassuring note. Just a subject line. Initiation of filing. Avery versus Kessler. Uncontested divorce. 5 days ago. Filed quietly. Without a conversation. Without the decency of warning me. She'd been ready to move on for over a week. even while pretending we still had time to talk. It stung, sure, but for once, it didn't cut. Because in that moment, standing in the driveway with nothing left to salvage, I felt something else bloom in my chest. Relief. Not because I was ready, but because she finally made it clear. There would be no more decoding text messages. No more second-guessing work trips. No more pretending that her silence at dinner was just stress or fatigue or me. It was over. Not because I gave up, but because I no longer had to fight for someone who had already left. And that clarity? It felt like oxygen. I drove to the lake that afternoon. Not to sulk, not even to think. Just to sit. To listen. To breathe without tiptoeing around someone else's secrets. I watched ducks skim across the surface, little kids toss bread chunks with no aim, and somewhere in the background, the distant hum of a violin from a street performer on the hill. I smiled. Because in the mess of everything, the lies, the forged signature, the empty bed, the second set of keys, I hadn't lost myself. She didn't take that part. She just handed it back without realizing. The next morning, I canceled the joint account. A few days later, I returned the lease notification with a signed rebuttal and attached proof of signature fraud. And by the end of the week, I submitted my own filing. My terms. Clean. Legal. Permanent. She didn't contest it. I moved out 2 weeks later, on my own terms, with my own key, and into a place where no whiteboards, fake calendars, or Thai takeout receipts followed me around like ghosts. The last time I saw her was at the notary office. She was quieter, more polite than I expected. She signed without a word. I wished her well, and meant it, because letting her go didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like permission to live. Now, I wake up in a small apartment with a creaky floor, mismatched mugs, and total peace. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a clumsy mutt named Toby who sleeps on my feet and chews my socks like it's his life's calling. I started cooking again, badly at first, but I'm getting the hang of it. And every night, I take a moment before bed to sit in silence, not to mourn what I lost, but to be thankful for what I finally walked away from. She thought she replaced me. She didn't. She freed me.